In 2002, eBay bought a payments company called PayPal for $1.5 billion. It seemed like a clean ending. A startup founded 4 years earlier, acquired, absorbed, done. The employees collected their checks, cleaned out their desks, and moved on. What happened next is one of the strangest stories in the history of business. Those employees didn't retire, they didn't take long holidays, they didn't go work for other companies. They took their money and immediately started building again. And what they built over the next 2 decades reshaped the entire planet. Electric cars, private space rockets, the world's largest professional network, YouTube, Palantir, Yelp, the first outside investment in Facebook, a vice president of the United States, the head of a government efficiency department. One company, one exit, one group of people, the PayPal Mafia. And this is how they did it. If you're new here, we cover stories like this every week. The companies, the founders, the moments that changed everything. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. To understand why PayPal produced so many extraordinary people, you have to understand what it was like to work there. It started as 2 separate companies that hated each other. In 1998, a Ukrainian immigrant named Max Levchin arrived in Silicon Valley after graduating from the University of Illinois. He had exactly $1,000 to his name. He showed up to a lecture given by a philosophy graduate turned derivatives trader turned startup founder named Peter Thiel, introduced himself afterwards, and within a week, the 2 of them had decided to build a company together. They called it Confinity. The plan was to let people send money between Palm Pilot devices using cryptography. It was extremely niche. It was also genuinely brilliant. At almost exactly the same moment, a young South African entrepreneur named Elon Musk, fresh from selling his first startup, Zip2, for $307 million, poured most of his money into an online bank called X.com. His vision was bigger. A complete internet financial superstore, banking, investments, insurance, all in one place. He wanted to replace the entire financial system. Both companies were racing to solve the same problem. Both were burning through cash. By early 2000, it was obvious they were spending fortunes fighting each other for the same users. In March 2000, they agreed to merge. The combined company would eventually be called PayPal. What followed was one of the most chaotic corporate histories in Silicon Valley. The merger was a collision of 2 completely different cultures. Levchin's engineering team thought Musk's approach was reckless. Musk thought Levchin was too focused on small problems. Thiel had stepped back from day-to-day operations just weeks after the merger, already sensing the dysfunction. The company went through 3 CEOs in 18 months. Here's where things get genuinely cinematic. In August 2000, Musk, now CEO, finally went on his honeymoon, a trip that had been delayed for months because of work. He was in Australia when the coup started. Back in California, Levchin, Thiel, and a group of senior executives drove to the offices of Sequoia Capital and made their case to the board. Musk needed to go. The board agreed. By the time Musk landed, he no longer had a job. Thiel was brought back as CEO. Musk, who remained the largest individual shareholder, didn't speak to Thiel for nearly a year. But here's what mattered. The instability forged something remarkable. To survive the dot-com crash, the fraud attacks, the internal wars, and the acquisition pressure, this team had to solve hard problems fast. Levchin built one of the first commercial anti-fraud systems in existence. The company invented one of the earliest versions of CAPTCHA. They figured out viral growth, referral mechanics, payment security, things nobody had built before because nobody had needed to. When eBay finally bought PayPal in October 2002 for $1.5 billion, the people who walked out the door weren't just wealthy. They were extraordinarily capable, battle-tested, and deeply frustrated with being told what to do. Musk took his $165 million and did 2 things at once. He co-founded SpaceX in 2002, with the stated goal of making humanity multiplanetary, and he became an early investor in a small electric car company called Tesla. Within a decade, he was CEO of both. Within 2 decades, SpaceX was launching NASA astronauts to the International Space Station, something the US government could no longer do on its own. And Tesla had become the most valuable car company on Earth. Thiel took his $55 million and made 2 moves that defined a generation of technology. In 2003, he co-founded Palantir Technologies, a secretive data analytics company that built the infrastructure for intelligence agencies and governments around the world. Then, in 2004, a Stanford friend named Reid Hoffman introduced him to a 19-year-old Harvard dropout who was building a social network. Thiel wrote a check for $500,000 for a 10.2% stake in Facebook. When Facebook went public in 2012, that stake was worth over $1 billion. He had become, at the precise right moment, the first outside investor in the most dominant social network in history. That Stanford friend, Reid Hoffman, had been PayPal's executive vice president. In 2003, while Musk was building rockets and Thiel was backing Zuckerberg, Hoffman quietly launched a professional social network called LinkedIn. It grew steadily for years, building the infrastructure of the global job market. And in 2016, Microsoft acquired it for $26 billion. Meanwhile, 3 PayPal engineers, Steve Chen, Chad Hurley, and Jawed Karim, sat in a garage in 2005, trying to solve a simple problem. They couldn't easily share videos online. They built a platform. 18 months later, Google bought it for $1.65 billion. It was called YouTube. Levchin funded Yelp at its founding with $1 million. Another PayPal executive co-founded Yammer, the enterprise social network sold to Microsoft for $1.2 billion. And Thiel's first investment vehicle, Founders Fund, became one of the most powerful venture capital firms in Silicon Valley, backing SpaceX, Airbnb, Spotify, and Lyft, among dozens of others. In 2007, Fortune magazine ran a story on all of this. They gathered the core members together for a photograph, suited, cigarettes optional, posed like a mob portrait. The headline called them the PayPal Mafia. The name stuck, but what the photograph couldn't capture was why. Why this one company? Why these particular people? Part of it was talent. PayPal hired obsessively for ability during a period when most startups hired for credentials. Part of it was timing. The eBay acquisition gave them capital at the exact moment the internet was rebuilding after the dot-com crash, when the best opportunities were cheapest. Part of it was the network. Within months of leaving PayPal, they were funding each other, advising each other, recruiting from each other. But more than anything, it was the experience itself. PayPal had been a war fraud attacks that threatened to destroy the company overnight. A merger that created 2 warring tribes inside one building. Management coups, a CEO removed while on honeymoon. Regulatory threats that could have shut them down. They had survived things most startup founders never face. And they had solved those problems without a blueprint, because nobody had written one yet. When they finally left, they weren't afraid of anything. In 2024, The Economist ran a cover story with a different kind of headline. It said, the PayPal Mafia was about to take over America's government. Thiel's protege became vice president. Musk became the head of a government efficiency department. Their former colleague became the White House advisor on artificial intelligence, a company founded in 1998, sold in 2002. And the people who walked out of it were still reshaping the world more than 2 decades later. Some mergers end companies. This one launched about 15 of them. If stories like this are your thing, there's a full playlist on this channel. And if this one taught you something you didn't know before, hit the like button. It genuinely helps more people find these stories. We'll see you in the next one.